The rookie EMT met with a CPR case on her first day at work, but she accidentally used too much force. The rookie was instantly terrified. Unexpectedly, the two senior colleagues mentoring her praised her for doing a great job. I can fix broken, I can't fix dead. Come on, in fact. Statistics show that nearly half of the patients rescued by CPR are later found to have broken ribs or sternum. So when saving lives, don't be afraid to break ribs. Compression depth is the key. This deeply encouraged the rookie EMT, Julie. She gritted her teeth and persisted with effective compressions, finally succeeding in transporting the patient to the emergency room. The doctor pushed Julie aside abruptly. The ECG is already flat. Why are you still pressing? Did you ever get a pulse back? No. The doctor announced the time of death with a blank expression, but when he turned around and saw the mud stains on the floor, he flew into a rage. He immediately confronted the senior EMT, Randy. Just track all the mud and bacteria you wanted in my ER. Meanwhile, Julie stood frozen in place, her hands still in the compression position. She never imagined that on her first day at work, the first person she tried to save would die just like that. While cleaning the ambulance, the driver, Mike, kindly told Julie, actually, when the ambulance first arrived at the scene, we could tell the person was already beyond saving. Julie became even more confused after hearing this. If he was already beyond saving, why did you let me keep doing CPR so desperately? 'Cause nobody dies in an ambulance. So even if he has zero chance of making it, even if we're just pumping blood through a corpse, we cannot declare him dead. It turns out the answer lies in a bizarre, unwritten rule. No one is allowed to die in the ambulance. EMTs can do their utmost to rescue, but they have no right to declare death. So patients must either die before the ambulance arrives, or hold on until they reach the hospital. No one is allowed to die in the ambulance under any circumstances. Julie was dumbfounded. Isn't this against medical common sense? But Mike smiled and said, even if the god of death comes, he has to step aside for the rules. In fact, Julie wasn't the first rookie that Randy and Mike had mentored. A few nights earlier, Randy and Mike went on a call with the new recruit, Jack. Randy even complained to the responding police officer, "This kid will probably quit before dawn." Although the police officer and Randy seemed to be getting along well, they both secretly hoped the incident had nothing to do with them. The police officer wished it was a medical case, so they wouldn't have to write a tedious report. Randy hoped it was a security threat so they could leave immediately. And with that, the door was slowly opened. The police officer's face lit up with joy the moment he saw the scene. What great luck it turned out to be a medical case. So the mess finally fell into Randy's lap. The patient was a drug addict who had overdosed. Without the EMTs, he would definitely not survive the night. Randy told Jack that American emergency medical care follows the ABC principle: first open the airway vent you're breathing, and finally promote blood circulation. But a rookie is just a rookie. He actually accidentally got close to a dirty needle. Randy solemnly warned Jack, if you get pricked by a dirty needle, you'll have to undergo chemotherapy just like cancer patients. You'll be lying in bed vomiting for 72 hours. You'll even have to get tested for AIDS over the next year. As a veteran EMT with 18 years and 8 months of service, he had seen countless deaths and disasters over the years. Death is a very profound and mysterious concept. Although everyone tries their best to avoid it, it always comes suddenly. What Randy and other EMTs do is to help people live a little longer. Just as Randy was lost in thought, someone rushed in with a gun in hand. Randy reacted quickly and immediately rushed out. In the end, the three of them all took cover behind the ambulance. The police officer ran inside to deal with the woman. Before long, the woman was arrested and taken away. Only then were Randy and the others able to get the patient onto the ambulance. During this process, Randy suddenly suffered from shortness of breath and a rapid heartbeat. Luckily, the symptoms subsided quickly. We're not going to let you die seriously. You say that one more time, I'm going to punch you in the throat. We never say that to a patient. After scolding Jack, Randy took out a dose of naloxone. This medicine is especially used to rescue patients suffering from opioid poisoning. But this drug has side effects, and they are much more severe for drug addicts. Randy kindly reminded Jack not to sit directly opposite the addict, who had just received the injection, but Randy's reminder came a bit too late. The woman whose euphoria had been taken away suddenly became violent. She struggled to get off the stretcher, trying to beat Randy up in the melee. Randy was accidentally pricked by a dirty needle. The woman pulled out. He was angry, and quickly told Mike to stop the ambulance and come to his aid. but Mike was so choked by the stench that he could barely breathe. Randy had to tell Jack to hit her with the oxygen cylinder. Unexpectedly, the rookie took out an oxygen mask instead. Randy was so annoyed that he couldn't help laughing. He had to knock the woman unconscious with the oxygen cylinder himself. What happened? We administered oxygen, thereby possibly resulting in some self-administered. But the doctor was quite arrogant and asked Randy, "Are you a doctor? If not, why are you analyzing the bump on the patient's head?" Randy was furious. "Are EMTs inferior to others? You sit comfortably in your clean hospital giving orders, while we risk our lives in all kinds of dirty and dangerous places. We still have to put up with your attitude." Just as the two were about to get into a fight, a very angry roar came from not far away. It was Jack, looking utterly defeated. On his first day at work, he had met with a shooting, been vomited on and choked by a drug addict. Yet there were still 11 hours left in his shift. He had had enough of being an EMT. "Can't go back on that ambulance. I quit, Randy," and Mike looked grim. But the doctor beside them wore a look of schadenfreude. What was even more tragic was that everyone in the hospital, even the cleaning staff, earned a higher annual salary than Randy, who had worked there for 18 years. 8 months later, Randy, who had been pricked by the dirty needle, took a week's sick leave and took chemotherapy drugs for a week straight. To be honest, the long-term, high-intensity and high-risk work had already left Randy exhausted and on the verge of collapse. So he began to consider changing careers. That's how Randy ended up interviewing for a job as an insurance agent. The HR manager said, "Our industry is quite stressful. How well do you handle pressure?" Randy only replied, "I'm an EMT." The HR manager nodded immediately. "That means your stress tolerance is definitely off the charts." In fact, Randy had initially chosen to be an EMT because he truly believed in it. He thought he could save lives and heal the wounded. But now America's healthcare system was completely broken. They pushed forward under pressure and risked their lives, only to be met with a cruel truth. EMTs couldn't actually help that many people. They were more like cleaners, tasked with mopping up the worst messes of life. Seen millions of dead bodies, body parts. I've seen arms and faces ripped off. And these images would be etched in his mind forever. Sometimes he even wanted to set that ambulance on fire. Randy knew he couldn't hold on much longer, so he had to get out of the EMT business as soon as possible. Otherwise, he would sooner or later kill someone due to exhaustion-induced mistakes. In the end, the interview turned into Randy's denunciation of his job. He thought he had definitely blown the opportunity. After all, who would hire someone so full of resentment? After his 1-week leave, Randy went back to work. He begged his supervisor to schedule him for fewer shifts. But the supervisor was also in a difficult position. There was a severe shortage of staff, so how could he let Randy take it easy? Besides, Randy's shifts were the hardest to schedule. His temper was notoriously bad. Only Mike from Ambulance 42 and the whole team could stand him. Just then, the supervisor suddenly told Randy that a new recruit had arrived and asked him to mentor her. Although Randy was very unwilling, he had no right to refuse. Mike couldn't help teasing him when he saw him return, but Randy wasn't in the mood for jokes today. He pulled Mike aside and asked if he could drive the ambulance for a day. But Mike refused without hesitation. Randy had to reluctantly walk into the ambulance compartment. The new recruit, Julie, was already waiting inside. Mike had mentored many interns before, and he could tell at a glance that Julie was a top student in the EMT training program. But Randy still wanted to talk her out of the job. "You really want to spend 24 hours in this hotbox with two sweaty dude? Because I asked your niece to set me up with the best? Because I want to learn from the best. I'm in the wrong truck." Randy had no choice but to agree to mentor Julie. But he laid down 3 rules. Don't act recklessly, don't touch things randomly. Don't talk unnecessarily, all actions must follow Randy's orders. Before starting their shift officially, Randy planned to take Julie for breakfast. As soon as they parked, the parking lot attendant approached to scold them. He said it was very selfish to take up 3 parking spaces with 1 vehicle. Randy explained that they parked this way, to leave immediately in case of an emergency. But the attendant wouldn't listen. He even said UEMPs are nothing but a nuisance. You'd be better off changing jobs to make a real contribution to the country. When ordering, Randy saw a sign for free coffee exclusively for heroes. He wanted to get one too, but the clerk told him that free coffee was only for firefighters, and police officers EMTs weren't considered heroes at all. Before Randy could argue further, the dispatch center issued an emergency call. So without even having breakfast, The three rushed to the scene to handle a mentally ill patient. This was actually an old acquaintance of Randy and Mike's. They had dealt with him countless times before. Seeing that he wasn't seriously hurt, Randy handed him the muffin he had just bought. Then he reported back to the dispatch center, saying there was no patient needing hospitalization on site. Julie immediately frowned and argued. According to the rules, we have to take him to the hospital for treatment. If we're caught leaving him here arbitrarily, we could have our licenses revoked. Brandy was unfazed. That guy's psychotic episodes are terrifying. But today he's clearly just hungry. He called 911 just to get a free meal in the emergency room. But that would involve a lot of complicated procedures. It's much easier to skip all that and just give them a meal to fix the problem. I sacrificed my delicious muffins for the good of humanity, Mike. Let's roll. But Randy suddenly wondered why Julie had become an EMT. Julie immediately replied that she simply wanted to save lives and heal the wounded. Her words made Randy and Mike laughed on the spot. Randy told Julie not to be naive. They weren't heroes at all. It was just a job. Moreover, most people in this line of work couldn't last a year, and those who did were considered tough. But even they usually quit after 5 years at most. Julie pressed him on how long he had been doing it. Randy's voice dropped as he said, 18 years and 8 months. Before long, they arrived at a car accident scene. Randy emphasized to Julie, walk steadily, don't rush to run. He added the first aid kit must have a window breaker. This is a mandatory lesson for new recruits. Julie not only knew the ABCs of first aid, she also diagnosed the patient with acidosis just by observing their breathing. These two things made Randy nod in approval secretly. Later, they successfully lifted the patient onto a stretcher. But the ECG monitors suddenly started beeping frantically. It was a life-threatening arrhythmia. So Randy immediately told Julie to act and start CPR right away. What happened next was exactly the scene at the beginning of the story. Julie had just taken her first real lesson as an EMT. Meanwhile, Randy went to a vending machine to buy something to tide him over. Unexpectedly, even the vending machine was against him. Randy cursed and banged on it in anger. At this point, Julie came over and helped him change a bill. She couldn't help but ask Randy, if you hate this job so much, why don't you quit? Randy shrugged and said, just to make a living after all. EMT experience wasn't an advantage in hospitals at all. If he really quit, the best he could do was work as a nursing assistant, changing patients' bedpans and wiping their bottoms. Besides, it was too late to go back to school to study medicine. By the time he finished his studies, he'd be ready to retire. He might as well take care of the present first. Randy inserted the money again, but the vending machine still didn't dispense anything. Anxiety and anger surged within him instantly. Randy's breathing became rapid again, and his heart raced. It was another panic attack. This was a side effect of years of high-pressure work. To help Randy calm down, Julie told him her story. When she was 13, she went camping with her mom and sister. Her mom loved cold chicken salad, but an accident happened that day. Her mom choked on the chicken. Julie didn't know what to do. She didn't even know the Heimlich maneuver. She could only watch helplessly as her mom stopped breathing. That's why she wanted to work in healthcare. After listening, Randy looked at the girl in front of him and sincerely advised her, run while you're young, don't wait until you regret it to realize there's no turning back. As soon as he finished speaking, Randy's phone suddenly rang. It was the insurance company. They had actually offered him the job. So Randy rushed to the supervisor's office, shouting that he was quitting. I did not say you could quit, and you have to finish your shift. That job offer call lifted Randy's spirits. As if he had returned from hell to paradise. He had already worked 6 hours. Once he got through the remaining 18, he could say goodbye to the EMT profession for good. Then Randy, Mike, and Julie set out again. The destination, this time, was a nursing home. Randy was over the moon now. Even the smell of disinfectant in the nursing home felt familiar and pleasant. But this joy was soon interrupted. She's been having a little trouble breathing lately. Define lately. Randy turned to Julian. Asked for her assessment. Who needed an assessment? The old man's face was already purple, and livor mortis had already set in. The nurse panicked as soon as she heard that, demanding, why aren't you rushing to resuscitate him? Randy retorted, resuscitate how? Yank Grandma back from heaven. The nurse tried to shift the blame to the EMTs, but Randy refused to take it. She had to rush off to get the head nurse. But Randy insisted. The patient was already deceased. Coroner would take over later. How do you know she's dead? She was just fine when I checked on her a few minutes ago. Look, judging from the rigor mortis, he had been dead for at least 5 or 6 hours. Mike stared at the nurse and said, you're the worst nurse I've ever seen. Not only are you irresponsible, you also try to pass the buck. The head nurse flew into a rage and threatened to file a complaint against them. Sure enough, before the ambulance even pulled out of the nursing home gate, Randy received a call from his supervisor. Randy recounted the whole incident truthfully. After listening, the supervisor told Randy not to worry. She would handle it so. The difficult head nurse was pitted against an even more difficult supervisor. If you and I were to go out there together right now and dig up my grandmother's corpse, do you think you could revive her? Because that makes about as much sense as what you're saying to me. Right now in the end, after the supervisor's friendly persuasion, the head nurse happily withdrew her complaint. Randy then brought up his resignation again. Mike told him bluntly, "You've been in this job for too long. You're already out of touch with society." He couldn't do anything except emergency medical work. Not to mention Randy had no wife or children. Every day after work, he would just lounge at home eating junk food. He probably couldn't even remember when he last washed his bed sheets. Randy was left tongue-tied by the criticism. Julie quickly stepped in to smooth things over, asking Randy what his new job was. When he heard selling insurance, Mike laughed even harder. He thought Randy couldn't even sell insurance, let alone last at a Subway selling sandwiches. Because normal people knew it was better to avoid trouble. Give customers whatever they wanted. But Randy would definitely insist on rules and order. But sticking to principles rigidly in most industries would only lead to complaints and eventual dismissal. Just then, Dispatch Center issued another new mission. When they arrived at the scene, they saw a man standing there in a daze. When he turned around, everyone realized a branch was stuck in his eye. Randy smelled a strong odor of alcohol on him and realized he hadn't felt the eye injury because he was drunk. Randy asked questions while examining the wound. The injured man was surprisingly lucid and answered smoothly, but soon he insisted firmly that he didn't want to go to the hospital. He didn't have insurance, Randy sighed silently. Even if he had insurance, drunk driving accidents weren't covered. While bandaging the eye, Randy told Julie to cover both of the man's eyes. But Julie thought it was unnecessary. There was no need to cover the uninjured one. Randy lowered his voice and emphasized, "This isn't a suggestion, it's an order." Julie felt a little resentful, but obeyed out of respect. The injured man was then rushed to the hospital. Julie kept pressing for the real reason behind covering both eyes. But Randy told her not to talk about it in front of the patient. He never expected the doctor to mention it. As soon as the doctor spoke, all their efforts were in vain. Is a stick in the eye what? After finishing their EMT duties, Randy finally explained to Julie, "Our two eyes don't work independently. When the patient moves his good eye, the injured one moves too. We don't know how deep the branch went, so we need to cover both eyes and not let the patient know the truth." To avoid further damage, Randy told Julie slowly and carefully, "Sometimes accident scenes are so intense, adrenaline spikes in your brain can't think clearly. The issue of eye synchronization is basic medical knowledge. Why couldn't you think of it at the scene? Because you were too eager to save people. You couldn't see the bigger picture." Julie, realizing her mistake, apologized quickly as night fell. The three finally had time to eat dinner, nearby customers noticing them. Curiously asked what the worst scene they had ever seen was. Although Randy didn't understand why people enjoyed hearing such things, he vividly recounted a story. Many years ago, they received a call for help. Someone complained about a strange smell coming from their neighbor's house. When they got into the apartment, they found a woman with postpartum depression in the microwave. They found her baby. "That is the worst thing I've ever heard in my life. I ordered it medium rare, ha." The girls lost their appetites instantly and stormed out of the restaurant. Julie quickly whispered, "This is just a horror story." The two men fell silent. Mike said in a deep voice. Julie still knew. She can still process bad things with some emotional buffer. After doing this job for a long time, your emotional reserves keep running out. In fact, Mike was also planning to quit. In 6 months, he would be starting law school. Then Mike told the story of his mother. Mike's mother had worked hard her whole life. She finally made it to retirement. When she got sick and went to the hospital for checks, the insurance covered it when she was diagnosed with cancer. The insurance covered that too. But when she needed treatment, the insurance company said it wasn't covered. His mother spent countless time and energy fighting for her rights. But it was all in vain in the meantime. The cancer cells spread wildly. In the end, Mike's mother passed away. The insurance company won. That's when Mike realized studying medicine couldn't save people. He had to study law. He had originally wanted to be a good person. So he became an EMT, earning minimum wage while carrying heavy social responsibilities. He had worked so hard for years, but couldn't even save his own family. Now he had to change careers to survive. That night, the dispatch center sent another call. It was an old acquaintance of Randy and Mike's. The president of the U.S. had another episode. Every time they dealt with this guy, they always ended up in trouble. So Randy clenched his fists and warned Julie, "We have to get him in the ambulance peacefully, or this president will beat us black and blue." But Julie was confused. Why don't they lock him up in a mental hospital? Mike shook his head inside. As long as the president takes his meds on time. He's a really nice guy, but the healthcare system only gives him 20 days worth of medication. Per month a month is more than 20 days. When he runs out of meds, he has to tough it out. Sometimes he makes it through. Sometimes he doesn't, Julie asked again. Why not call the police for help? Look. Charlie is a 6'6" black man with mental health issues. Would you call the police? They arrived at the scene shortly after. At this point, the president was frantically smashing things. Randy quickly pulled Julie behind him to protect her from accidental harm. Mike but came up with a clever plan. Pretending to be a Secret Service agent, he said he would escort the president to safety. Surprisingly, the trick worked. The president followed them down to the first floor obediently. But he changed his mind as soon as they reached the door. He refused to take the ambulance and insisted on flying instead. Randy and Julie had to pretend the ambulance was a plane. Just as the president was ready to board, a shrill siren cut through the night. Randy hurried to explain to the police that they had the situation under control, but the officers insisted on handling it themselves. The president flew into a rage instantly. The police immediately drew their guns. One wrong move at this point could have led to a fatal shooting. Mike quickly stepped forward to calm the president down and stood in front of him to shield him. "Please calm down. I don't give a fuck, man." But I give a fuck, luckily. With Mike's reassurance, the president managed to regain his composure. The worst-case scenario was avoided, but no one could guarantee that the president would be so lucky next time. Thinking about this, Mike punched the ambulance door a few times. But the president still couldn't settle down during the ride. To make matters worse, Randy had another panic attack. Administering a sedative to the patient required prior approval from a doctor, but Randy's mind was in chaos. When reporting, he mistakenly said atropine instead of Ativan to make it even worse. The doctor who answered the radio was his arch enemy, but the doctor seemed exhausted tonight and didn't have the energy to bicker with him. When they met, the doctor asked listlessly, "There are 3 hospitals nearby. Why do you always send patients to me?" But the hospital assignment was decided by the dispatch center. Randy had no say in the matter. The doctor couldn't help complaining. "You only handle 1 patient at a time. But all 25 beds here are full. The administration won't hire more staff. Yet they expect me to stay calm and work quickly. How can I work fast under these conditions? I'm already swamped and I still have to deal with your things. From now on, send your patients to the hospital next door. It'll be easier for everyone." But as soon as he finished speaking, the doctor's name was called from the examination room. The doctor had to rush back to work. A new emergency call came in at 10 p.m. It was a boy. He had been hit in the chest by a baseball during a game and lost consciousness. Someone had already administered 2 defibrillation shocks, and CPR had been ongoing nonstop, but the boy still hadn't woken up. Randy took the defibrillator and pressed the shock button again. The boy finally opened his eyes slowly. Applause erupted from everyone at the scene instantly. "I can't die. We're going to do everything in our power to make sure that doesn't happen." It turned out the boy had been hit by the baseball during the 1 millimeter window of cardiac systole, a probability of nearly 1 in a million. The boy's condition was very critical. The boy asked again, "Am I going to die?" Randy's heart softened completely, so he replied, "You'll be okay. I promise." This was the most taboo promise for a medical professional. Within a few minutes, the boy's condition suddenly worsened, and he slipped into deep coma once more. By the time they reached the hospital, the boy had no heartbeat. Randy tried every emergency measure possible, but nothing worked. He could only pin his last hope on the doctors. But 10 minutes later, a female doctor walked out saying, "We couldn't save the boy." The news plunged Randy into silence. Randy knew he had made a terrible mistake. He should never have made that promise. Now it had turned into a curse that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Over the past 18 years and 8 months, Randy had saved countless lives. Among them were people who didn't cherish their lives at all. Randy alone had rescued one such person 5 or 6 times. So many people who deserved to die were still alive and well. Yet a good kid who only wanted to play baseball couldn't make it through the night. Randy had had enough completely, so he went to the supervisor's office and signed his resignation papers. Randy could have left right then, but he decided to finish his last shift of the night. It wasn't long before another call came in from the dispatch center. A serious car accident had occurred on the highway. 2 vehicles collided and the scene was horrific. After getting out of the ambulance, Randy checked the pulses of the victims one by one. Due to improper use of seat belts, all 4 people in the silver car were killed instantly. Julie was so shocked that she couldn't speak for a long time. Next to the other gray car, a woman had been thrown out. After examination, she still had vital signs. But as Randy rolled the injured woman over, something fell from her. It was a pacifier, meaning there was most likely a baby in the car. Randy held his breath nervously. Luckily, the child was protected by a car seat and unharmed. Randy carefully lifted the child out, bringing a glimmer of hope to the rescue. Soon after, both the child and the mother were loaded onto the ambulance. Examination showed the child had no injuries. But the mother's condition was far more critical. She had multiple skull and rib fractures, and even her gag reflex had disappeared. The problem was that the hospital with Randy's arch-enemy doctor was already overcrowded. They weren't accepting any patients except those with level 1 trauma. The other hospital was too far away. The injured woman couldn't wait that long. Randy gritted his teeth and decided to take her there anyway. Naturally, this led to the doctor's refusal. 1 criteria. Do you have any idea how expensive a level 1 criteria is? Any idea meets all level 1 criteria. She's not even educated upon hearing this. Randy finally snapped and shouted loudly at the doctor. The 2 men, both driven to the edge by their jobs, almost came to blows at this point. Julie could no longer hold back. She angrily told the doctor, "This patient has had 3 apnea episodes on the way here. She has no gag reflex and skull fractures. She fully meets the criteria for level 1 trauma. Randy is doing everything he can to save this woman. You're standing here wasting time arguing with him like an idiot. If you refuse to treat her, you'll lose your goddamn license." "Who are you?" "I'm Dr. Romero." "I'm your new resident." The doctor had to agree to admit the patient. It turned out Julie's real identity was a resident physician. Randy and Mike had jumped to conclusions earlier, assuming she was an intern EMT. Julie found it amusing and didn't bother to reveal the truth. Before long, Julie came over to tell them the mother had been saved. Julie paused, then said solemnly, if she had arrived even 5 minutes later, she wouldn't have made it. Julie knew Randy was physically and mentally exhausted. Thinking he hadn't changed anything, after all these years today. "You changed so much, you saved a whole family. You're the kind of doctor I want to be. Not a doctor if I ever need saving. God, I hope it's you that shows up." The 24-hour shift was finally over. The colleagues at the emergency center had prepared a surprise for Randy. The supervisor reluctantly bid farewell to this outstanding veteran employee sometime later. Randy joined the insurance company. During lunch, Randy talked endlessly about his EMT stories. But the bizarre and terrifying ways people died made his colleagues lose their appetites. A week later, Randy had mastered all his job responsibilities. Although the work was easy and he got off on time, Randy couldn't bring himself to be happy. On his way home from work one day, Randy unexpectedly spotted Ambulance 42. Memories of the past flooded his mind. In the end, Randy put on his EMT uniform and went to see the supervisor again. The supervisor had been expecting this day, so she had never filed Randy's resignation papers. The resignation was treated as if it had never happened. And the happiest person of all was undoubtedly his old partner, Mike. "I'm no hero, I only feel alive when you're about to die." This is where the story comes to a complete end. Code 3 has no grand rescue scenes, nor does it have a dramatic, heroic narrative instead. Through the 24-hour duty experience of veteran EMT Randy, his partner Mike, and the newcomer Julie, it lays bare the deep-seated flaws of the American healthcare system and the faint glimmers of humanity within it. It shows that even in a deeply flawed system, there are still people who strive desperately to save lives and heal the wounded. The film uses numerous details to criticize the chaos hidden behind medical civilization, including the rigidity and formalism of the healthcare system, the severe imbalance between the efforts of practitioners and their rewards, and the disregard for life by capital and rigid rules. Yet it also eulogizes the bright spots in ordinary people, such as their dedication to their profession and original aspirations, as well as their reverence for life. Overall, this film doesn't romanticize suffering nor deify heroes. EMTs are ordinary people too. They complain, break down, and want to escape, but in the face of life, They always set aside their personal emotions, embracing the simplest reverence and love for life, and continue moving forward on this arduous path. If you enjoyed my channel, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe.